Hey Opositores, welcome to another video in my journey towards the Oposiciones exam. I am just a fellow student like yourselves, trying to get one step closer to becoming a Spanish public school teacher. And today we're going to dive into the world of 19th century Irish literature, in particular focusing on Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw. You might think that Irish literature from the 19th century is about as exciting as watching paint dry, but these two writers are very interesting because they did things their own way. Oscar Wilde, with his particular wit and extravagant style, and George Bernard Shaw, with his social commentary and sharp tongue. So put the kettle on, grab yourself a cuppa, and buckle up, because it's going to be a wild ride. Or should I say, Oscar Wilde ride. In this video, we'll be diving into the works and lives of two of Ireland's most celebrated playwrights, Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw. The final decade of the 19th century in England marked a time of transition and upheaval in the literary and artistic world. Writers and artists of this time were neither of the earlier Victorians nor of the 20th century. They are often referred to as the late Victorian or the first of the moderns. Art for life's sake was replaced by art for art's sake, as the aesthetic movement, which originated in France, took hold in England. This movement celebrated beauty, style, and individuality, and embraced the bohemian life, which was considered scandalous and unconventional at the time. The idea of the artist as rejected by the ordinary society also became popular. In contrast, England was experiencing a growth of popular education, and an unsophisticated literary public emerged. The so-called decadents reflected a moral sentiments and made extensive use of sensual or exotic imagery. We can see it in the poetry of Swinburne and his erotic works, which in turn influenced Wilde's Salome. In the realm of drama, Ibsen, who was known as the father of realism, was considered scandalous for his provocative work, and his influence was seen in the themes of drama, which focused on religion, youth and age, labor and capital, and above all, sex. In poetry, the decadent movement championed art for art's sake, with Walter Pater and the Georgian school rejecting the complexity of Victorian poetry and its embellished descriptions in favor of simplicity and reality. Meanwhile, the movement of imagism, which was initiated by Home and further by Pound, changed the rules of poetry. In novels, writers rejected Victorianism and sought to understand the new society. Gaskell and Eliot explored the social changes, while the fantasy genre was popularized by R.L. Stevenson and L. Carroll. Realism became known as the problem novel and introduced new relations between the sexes, with the fallen woman being replaced by the new woman. Indirect or oblique narrative, inner consciousness, and explorations of the subconscious, influenced by the works of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, also emerged. In the world of modern fiction, the influence of French and Russian novelists could be seen, with short stories becoming more popular, and regional fiction also gaining recognition. Wilde and Shaw were two of the most important figures of this time, with their works reflecting the diverse literary movement of the period. Let's focus now on Oscar Wilde. We'll start by talking about his life. Oscar Wilde was born in Dublin, Ireland on October 16, 1854. He was the second of three children born to Sir William Wilde and Jane Francesca Wilde. Sir William Wilde was a prominent ear and eye surgeon in Ireland, who also had a passion for archaeology and folklore, and published several books on these subjects. Jane Francesca Wilde, who wrote under the pseudonym Speranza, was a revolutionary poet and an authority on Celtic myth and folklore. Wilde was educated at Trinity College Dublin, where he studied classics and mathematics, and later at Magdalen College, Oxford, where he focused on classics and philosophy. His parents were both well educated, with a strong interest in the arts, which undoubtedly influenced Oscar's love for literature and the aesthetic values he held dear throughout his life. Wilde's devotion to aesthetics was often met with skepticism and even ridicule, as it was seen as unmanly in Victorian society. The emphasis on masculine traits such as hard work, stoicism, and practicality meant that men who expressed an interest in beauty and art were often perceived as weak or effeminate. However, Wilde refused to be discouraged and instead embraced his love of aesthetics, using his wit and charm to challenge societal norms and push boundaries. Despite the criticism he faced, Wilde continued to promote the importance of aesthetics and its role in shaping society. He saw beauty and art as a means of bringing people together, creating a sense of community and shared experience. He believed that by embracing aesthetics, people could find common ground and work towards a better world. This philosophy is reflected in his writing, where he explores the themes of beauty, art, and aesthetics with wit, intelligence, and humor. He famously said, "I have the simplest tastes. I'm always satisfied with the best." Oscar Wilde's life in America was marked by his tour as a lecturer on aesthetics and the decorative arts. In the late 1880s, he embarked on a lecture tour throughout the United States, giving speeches on his ideas about art and aesthetics. Wilde was a highly flamboyant figure, known for his wit and humor, and his lectures proved to be a great success, attracting large crowds wherever he went. During his tour, Wilde made several famous remarks that have since become part of his legacy. One of the most famous is his remark about the Niagara Falls, which he said was a disappointment for every young American couple who went there for the honeymoon. Wilde saw the Niagara Falls as a symbol of the disillusionment that often accompanied American married life. Aside from his critiques of American culture, Wilde was also highly impressed by certain aspects of American life. He had a great admiration for the native Indians and the Chinese of San Francisco, and he was known to ridicule the Mormons of Salt Lake City. Wilde's tour of America was not just a success in terms of his lectures, but it also allowed him to experience different aspects of American life and culture, which would later influence his work. Despite his criticisms, Wilde was fond of America and its people, and his tour left a lasting impression on him. Oscar Wilde married Constance Lloyd in 1884, who was the daughter of a wealthy Queen's Counsel. She was known for her intelligence and charm and was considered an important figure in the aesthetic movement of the time. Wilde and Constance had 2 children together, Cyril and Vivian, but their marriage did not go well. Wilde's increasing involvement in the aesthetic movement and his growing reputation as a wit and a dandy often caused tension in the relationships. After his return from America in 1883, Wilde faced financial difficulties and struggled to make ends meet. He attempted to earn money throughout journalism and writing, but these endeavors proved insufficient. Wilde's lavish lifestyle and aesthetic pursuits put him in debt and led to economic hardship. Despite these difficulties, Wilde continued to write and produce plays, eventually achieving great success in the last decade of his life with works such as The Importance of Being Earnest and Lady Windermere's Fan. Oscar Wilde's homosexuality was considered a criminal offense in Victorian England, and it eventually led to his arrest. Wilde's relationship with Lord Alfred Douglas, nicknamed Bossy, was a source of scandal and controversy. Bossy's father, the Marquis of Queensberry, was particularly vocal in his opposition to the relationship and publicly accused Wilde of being a homosexual. This led to Wilde suing the Marquis for libel, but the case was thrown out and Wilde was subsequently charged with homosexuality and gross indecency. He was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor in prison. The time in prison had a profound effect on Wilde, and he became extremely ill. Upon his release, he was reunited with Bossy, but the relationship had become strained and was never the same. Wilde's health continued to decline, and he died on November 30th, 1900, at the age of 46. In his semi-conscious final moments, he was received into the Roman Catholic Church and was administered baptism and extreme unction. Wilde's legacy as a playwright, poet, and writer remains intact, and his life continues to be a subject of fascination. However, his arrest and subsequent imprisonment for homosexuality serve as a reminder of the harsh and unjust treatment of LGBTQ individuals in the past. The legalization of homosexuality in England in 1967 marked a turning point in the fight for LGBTQ rights and signaled a shift towards greater tolerance and acceptance of LGBTQ individuals. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a novel published in 1890. The story follows the handsome and wealthy young Dorian Gray, who, after having his portrait painted, becomes obsessed with the idea of preserving his youthful appearance and beauty. He wishes that the portrait would age and bear the marks of time instead of him. As a result, Dorian embarks on a life of decadence and debauchery, committing immoral acts without any sense of guilt or consequence. The portrait becomes a symbol of Dorian's inner corruption, as it reveals the physical and moral degradation that he hides from the world. Meanwhile, Dorian remains outwardly charming and beautiful and continues to lead a hedonistic lifestyle, all the while his portrait grows more grotesque and distorted. As the novel progresses, Dorian's sins catch up with him, and he becomes increasingly haunted by his own conscience. He realizes that his pursuit of pleasure has come at a terrible cost, so Dorian tries to destroy the portrait, but when his servants enter the room, they find an old, wrinkled man on the floor, with a knife plunged into his heart, and the portrait is restored to its original beauty. The novel explores the symbolic and dialectic representation of Wilde's personality through the character of Dorian. Dorian's fear of life leads him to seek refuge in a false aestheticism, which ultimately leads to his moral and physical decay. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a masterful exploration of the human condition and the dangers of living a life solely focused on beauty, youth, and pleasure. Wilde's writing is lush and evocative, and he employs a variety of literary devices such as symbolism and imagery to convey the novel's themes. The book's relevance endures to this day, as it speaks to the dangers of a culture that places too much emphasis on appearance and the fleeting nature of youth. Its cautionary tale is as timely now as it was when it was first published over a century ago. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde is a novel that explores various themes. The first theme is the purpose of art. Wilde believed that art should have no purpose other than to be beautiful, aestheticism, in contrast to the social education and teaching of morals in books by Dickens. The second theme is the supremacy of youth and beauty. Dorian Gray is a young man who is vain and obsessed with his youth and beauty. He seeks to escape the harsh realities of the real world through his beauty. The painting symbolizes Dorian's soul and shows the physical and moral decay that occurs as he indulges in various vices. Finally, the novel critiques the superficiality of Victorian society. The characters are obsessed with their social status, and their lives revolved around parties, gossip, and appearances. The book shows how people can be easily influenced by appearances and how they can be blinded to the truth by outward beauty. The Importance of Being Earnest is a satirical play written in 1895. It is a witty and comical exploration of Victorian social conventions and the hypocrisy of high society. The play follows the lives of two young gentlemen, Jack Worthing and Algernon Moncrief. Both of them lead double lives and pretend to be someone else to escape the burdens of their real lives. Jack, for instance, creates a fictional brother named Earnest, which he uses as an excuse to visit his love interest, Gwendolyn Fairfax, in London. Algernon, on the other hand, pretends to have a sick friend called Bunbury, whom he visits whenever he needs a break from his aunt, Lady Bracknell. The plot thickens when both men fall in love with two women, Gwendolyn and Cecily Cardew. However, their relationships are threatened when the women insist on marrying someone named Earnest. The comedic chaos that ensues includes mistaken identities, misunderstandings, and the involvement of the formidable Lady Bracknell. Wilde uses witty dialogue, absurd situations, and mistaken identities to create a humorous and light-hearted tone throughout the play. One of the ways in which Wilde achieves this tone is by deliberately avoiding any serious or somber moments in the play. Even when characters encounter setbacks or difficulties, these moments are quickly turned around into humorous situations. This is evident in the play's resolution, where all of the conflicts are resolved in a way that is both unexpected and comical. The play is a commentary on the triviality of upper-class society, and by avoiding serious moments, Wilde highlights the absurdity and superficiality of the society he is satirizing. The Importance of Being Earnest has been regarded as one of the greatest works of modern English drama, and continues to be performed on stages across the world. A Woman of No Importance is a play that explores the double standard of Victorian society. The play revolves around the life of Mrs. Arbuthnot and her son Gerald. Mrs. Arbuthnot has been living as a social outcast for the past 20 years with her son. However, when Gerald meets Lord Illingworth, he becomes drawn to him and the upper-class lifestyle he represents. The play takes a dramatic turn when it is revealed that Lord Illingworth is Gerald's father, and Mrs. Arbuthnot has been concealing this fact from everyone. Gerald must decide whether to embrace his newfound status or to stand with his mother. The play explores themes such as morality, social class, and the treatment of women in society. Wilde uses witty dialogue and irony to criticize the hypocrisy of the upper class and the strict moral standards. He also examines the sacrifices that women often make in society, highlighting the unfair treatment they receive. The title, A Woman of No Importance, is a commentary on the societal view of women as insignificant, which Wilde challenges throughout the play. Overall, the play is a critique of Victorian society and its values. Apart from the mentioned works, Wilde also wrote poetry, which includes collections such as The Ballad of Reading Gaol and Poems in Prose. His non-fiction works, Intentions, consisted of essays that expressed his views on art, literature and criticism. Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories and A House of Pomegranates are two collections of short stories written by Wilde. Lady Windermere's Fan and An Ideal Husband are two plays that gained immense popularity and were a part of Victorian society's literature. Lastly, Salome is a one-act play known for its scandalous content, which depicts the biblical story of the beheading of John the Baptist. Let's talk now about Shaw, starting with his life. George Bernard Shaw was born in Dublin, Ireland on July 26, 1856. He was the third and youngest child of George Carr Shaw and Lucinda Elizabeth Gurley Shaw. His father was an unsuccessful corn merchant and his mother was a professional singer. Shaw's parents were both Protestant and of Anglo-Irish descent. When Shaw was only 6 years old, his father left the family and went to London, leaving Shaw's mother to support the family. Shaw and his elder siblings were sent to live with their mother's relatives in Dublin, while she joined her husband in London. Later, Shaw and his sister Lucinda moved to London to live with their mother. Shaw did not have a conventional education, as he was mostly self-taught. He spent much of his time reading and writing, and he was particularly interested in music and theatre. He attended the Wesleyan Connexional School, where he developed an interest in socialism and Irish nationalism. Shaw was a voracious reader and read works by a wide variety of authors, including William Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, and George Eliot. He also read the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and other socialist writers, which had a significant impact on his political views. Shaw was a lifelong advocate of socialism and worked to promote socialist ideas throughout his career. In 1884, after relocating to London, Shaw became a member of the Fabian Society, a group of middle-class socialists who sought to transform English society through education and legislative reform. The Fabians advocated for intellectual and political activism as a means of change rather than revolution. Shaw actively participated in the society, attending meetings regularly and writing articles for the publications. The group would eventually play a significant role in establishing both the London School of Economics and the Labour Party. Shaw continued to write and publish throughout this period, although he did not experience much success until the turn of the century. His early works, such as Immaturity, were considered overly didactic and unsuccessful. However, he gained recognition with a series of unpleasant plays, including Widower's Houses and Mrs. Warren's Profession, which challenged Victorian's conventions and social norms. In the 1890s, Shaw began to write what he called pleasant plays, such as Arms and the Man and Candida, which were more commercially successful than his earlier works. These plays also contained social criticism, but they were delivered in a more palatable form. Despite his growing success, Shaw remained committed to socialist and Fabian ideals and continued to use his writing as a tool for political and social change. Shaw continued to publish plays and works throughout the turn of the century, with mixed successes. In 1901, he published 3 plays for Puritans. His works from Man and Superman in 1903 to St. John 1923 brought him great success and popularity, earning him the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1925. Shaw was not only a successful playwright, but also a prolific writer of essays and articles, often discussing social and political issues of the day. Despite his success as a writer, Shaw was not without controversy. He held some unconventional views, including his support for eugenics, which he advocated for decades. Despite the horrific evidence of Nazi death camps during World War II, Shaw refused to recant his views. He also contracted smallpox in 1881, which left him with facial scars, causing him to grow a beard, or else be unable to shave. However, instead of advocating for vaccination, he campaigned against it, calling it nothing short of attempted murder. Shaw was also a supporter of authoritarian dictators, including Joseph Stalin, whom he admired for his leadership qualities. He was also an admirer of Benito Mussolini and expressed support for Adolf Hitler in the early days of his regime. Shaw's political views were often controversial, but his writing continues to be celebrated for its wit, satire, and social commentary. Shaw remains one of the most influential and celebrated playwrights in the English language, considered by many the second most important English writer after Shakespeare. Man and Superman. The play centers around Jack Tanner, a successful author and philosopher who is pursued by Anne Whitefield, a young woman who wishes to marry him. Along the way, they encounter various characters, including Octavius Robinson, an idealistic young man, and Hector Malone, an American tycoon. The main theme of the play is the conflict between men and women, particularly their different perspectives on love, marriage, and the roles of the sexes in society. Shaw uses the character of Jack Tanner to expound his own philosophical ideas, including the concept of the life force and the idea that marriage is a form of slavery for men. The discussion of the role of women in society is still relevant today. The character of Jack Tanner, with his radical ideas and rebellious nature, has been influential in popular culture, particularly in the portrayal of anti-heroes. Shaw's use of dream sequences and other experimental techniques was ahead of its time and influenced later works, in particularly the modernists. Major Barbara was first performed in 1905. The play revolves around the life of a young woman named Barbara Undershaft, who is a major in the Salvation Army. She is the daughter of a wealthy arms manufacturer named Andrew Undershaft, whom she despises due to his profession of manufacturing weapons of destruction. When Andrew invites Barbara to visit his factory, she reluctantly agrees and becomes fascinated by the way he operates the business. Meanwhile, her love interest, a poor Greek scholar named Adolphus Cousins, becomes close with Andrew and begins to see the good in the weapons industry. This leads to a conflict between Barbara's principles and her father's beliefs. One of the main themes of the play is the contrast between poverty and wealth, as well as the morality of war and the role of religion in society. Shaw uses a technique called Shavian wit, in which he pokes fun at societal conventions and uses humor to make serious points. The play addresses important social and political issues that are still relevant today. It features complex and well-developed characters that challenge the audience's preconceptions. The use of humor and irony makes the play both entertaining and thought-provoking. The play's criticism of the arms industry and the role of religion in society has influenced later works such as Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five and Joseph Heller's Catch-22. Pygmalion is a play written by George Bernard Shaw and first performed in 1913. The play tells the story of Henry Higgins, a phonetics professor who makes a bet that he can transform a Cockney flower girl, Eliza Doolittle, into a refined, upper-class woman. The main themes of the play are social class, gender roles, and the power of language. Through Higgins' experiment with Eliza, Shaw explores the idea that a person's social standing is largely determined by their speech and manners rather than their innate qualities. Connection with the classic myth, Ovid's Metamorphoses is a Roman epic poem that recounts the history of the world from creation to deification. One of the many tales in the work is the myth of Pygmalion, a sculptor who falls in love with a statue he has carved and prays to the goddess Venus to bring the statue to life. Venus grants his wish, and Pygmalion and his beloved statue live happily ever after. Shaw's play Pygmalion was inspired by the myth and borrows its central plot, with the character of Henry taking the task of transforming Eliza. Shaw's technique in Pygmalion involves the use of witty, rapid-fire dialogue and humor to skewer the social conventions and class hierarchies of Edwardian England. The play also contains moments of dramatic tension, particularly as Eliza struggles to find her place in society. The play's exploration of social class and the power of language continues to be relevant today. The play has been adapted into numerous films, including the highly successful My Fair Lady musical and the romantic comedy Pretty Woman. Pygmalion has been cited as an influence on The Catcher in the Rye and The Handmaid's Tale as well. The play's central character, Henry Higgins, is a complex and fascinating figure who has been interpreted in a variety of ways over the years. St. John. The play tells the story of Joan of Arc, a young peasant girl who hears the voices of saints telling her to lead the French army against the English during the 100 Years' War. The play explores themes of faith, politics, and the nature of power. Joan's unwavering faith and her willingness to challenge established power structures make her a controversial figure, and the play depicts her trial and eventual execution by the church and the state. Shaw's technique in St. John involves a blend of historical accuracy and his own interpretation of events. He portrays Joan as a strong, intelligent, and passionate woman, in contrast to the popular image of her as a naive and simple girl. Shaw also uses the play to comment on contemporary issues such as the rise of totalitarianism in Europe. The play offers a unique interpretation of the historical figure of Joan of Arc, portraying her as a complex and dynamic character rather than a one-dimensional saint. Shaw's use of language and dialogue in the play is widely regarded as some of his best work, with characters engaging in witty and thought-provoking conversations. He received the Nobel Prize for this work. St. John tackles themes that are still relevant today, such as the role of women in society and the dangers of blind faith, and the relationship between religion and politics. The play has been adapted into numerous films, operas, and other works of art, demonstrating its lasting influence on popular culture. The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism. The book was written after winning the Nobel Prize at the peak of Shaw's popularity. It was meant as an introduction to socialism and capitalism, aimed at women who were interested in politics and social issues. It provides a nuanced and complex view of socialism that goes beyond simplistic stereotypes. Shaw's technique in The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism involves using humor and satire to make his arguments more engaging and accessible to readers. He also makes use of personal anecdotes and historical examples to illustrate his points. It was a pioneering work in its time, aimed at women and written in an accessible and engaging style. The book influenced later works on socialism and economics, including the writings of John Maynard Keynes and the policies of the British Labour Party. Using literature in ESL lessons can be an effective way to improve reading and comprehension skills, build vocabulary and enhance cultural understanding. Here are some tips for teachers on how to make literature engaging and effective in the classroom. When teaching the works of Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw in English as a second language lessons for secondary education students, we're thinking between more or less 12 and 18 years old, here are 10 best practices to follow to make the experience engaging and effective. Number 1. Choose age-appropriate books that are engaging and relevant to the students' interests. There are reader versions adapted to young students of some of these works, but in particular, A Picture of Dorian Gray is used by many Spanish schools for students around 12 to 14 years old. Let your students know that Pygmalion inspired the musical My Fair Lady, which also inspired the film Pretty Woman. Number 2. Set clear learning objectives for each reading assignment. Know what you want your students to learn at the end of the lessons and how can literature help them and connect it with the topics the students are learning. Think about transversal learning. Put an emphasis on science by discussing how Darwinism affected Wilde and Shaw's work. Discuss Shaw's controversial support of Mussolini and Stalin and connect it with what the students know about history. Analyze the frequency of certain words in Wilde's books and have the students represented in graphs to link it to maths. Number 3. Provide students with a pre-reading activity that activates prior knowledge and builds interest. Encourage students to use contextual clues and ask questions to increase comprehension. Number 4. Encourage student engagement. Teachers should create a positive and interactive learning environment where students are encouraged to participate and actively engage with the texts. One way to do this is to provide a variety of activities such as discussions, role plays, and writing assignments. Writing assignments in particular are the perfect hands-on activities that will make students engaged with literature. Number 5. Incorporate drama into the lesson. It can help to bring the texts to life for students. Teachers can have students act out scenes for the plays, and even create their own original scenes and dialogues based on the texts. Number 6. Address the needs of students with special educational needs. Teachers should be aware of the needs of students with special educational needs and make appropriate accommodations. For example, for a student with dyslexia, teachers may provide an audio version of the text. For students with autism spectrum disorder, teachers may use visual aids or cues and provide clear instructions, and allow the student to take breaks as needed. Number 7. Differentiate instruction. Teachers should differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all students, including those who are more advanced or struggling with the material. For example, teachers can provide additional resources such as simplified versions of the text or translations when needed to students who are struggling with the material. Number 8. Create opportunities for reflection. Teachers should provide opportunities for reflection and self-assessment. Make sure that assessment is at the core of everything that we do in an English classroom. This can include journaling, group discussions, or individual writing assignments. Number 9. Link the authors to the UN Development Goals. A Woman of No Importance by Wilde and St. John are excellent books to discuss to tackle goal number 5, gender equality. Wilde's personal struggle and the fact that he was sentenced to prison for being homosexual can lead to conversations about goal number 16, peace, justice and strong institutions, and goal number 10, reducing inequalities. Shaw's socialist ideas are a good starting point to discuss goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 10, create projects following PBL principles. Students will thrive designing a Wilde-inspired fashion show. Oscar would love it, I am sure, working in teams in a political campaign that will culminate in some fake elections using Shaw's political ideas, or taking part in an aesthetic movement-inspired escape room. In conclusion, the study of Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw has provided us with a glimpse into the historical and literary context of late Victorian era and the birth of modernism. In the context of the Victorian age and imperialism, this period brought great changes from an atmosphere of welfare and confidence at the beginning of the century to decadence towards the end. The Industrial Revolution was a model of historical transformation, and the development of the British Empire marked the second phase of imperial expansion. The Irish question was also a significant issue at the turn of the century, shaping the background of both authors. We have provided a literary background of Victorian literature and the birth of modern literature, including the main literary forms of the time: prose, poetry and drama. The Victorian drama, in particular, has been explored in depth, with a focus on the life, style and main works of the most prominent Victorian dramatists, including Wilde and Shaw. The educational implications of this study have also been highlighted, emphasizing the importance of cross-curricular learning in helping language learners understand the richness of English literature, not only in Great Britain, but also in other English-speaking countries. Best practices on how to include this topic in class have also been facilitated. By making connections between literature and history, students can gain a deeper understanding of the main plot of a novel, short story, or any other form of literary work. It is crucial to encourage learners to reflect on the relevance of literature to the modern world and how it can help them understand the world around them, in particular to second year of Bachillerato students. All bibliographical references used to develop the study are presented now. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in and joining me on this Opositor journey. Remember, it's not just about studying hard, but also finding ways to enjoy the process. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this channel with your fellow opositores. Let's support each other and ace those exams together. Bye-bye.